This story isn't about ancient wars, but a modern dispute, a disagreement between two nations over a sacred place. It began with a temple, and a mountain, and a line drawn by someone who didn't live there. A line that now divides Cambodia and Thailand. This is Preah Vihear, a temple nearly 1,000 years old, built in the 10th century by the Khmer Empire, crowned in the 12th as a stairway to the divine. But by the 15th century, the Khmer Empire was fading. To the west, the kingdom of Siam, what we now call Thailand, was rising. The Dangrek Mountains gave Preah Vihear its majesty, but not its neutrality. It was sacred to both Khmer and Siamese kings, worshipped, protected, fought for. In 1904, France, the colonial ruler of Cambodia, and Siam agreed to mark the border. They set up a border commission and followed the watershed principle. Ridges and water divides would determine sovereignty. A strict application of this principle positioned Preah Vihear within Siam's territory. But in 1907, French surveyors submitted a map, Annexure 1. It placed Preah Vihear on the Cambodian side, despite the temple being built atop a cliff only accessible from Siam. An inconsistency not born of geography, but a discrepancy made by French mapmakers at a drafting table in colonial Saigon. France produced a document inconsistent with agreed principles, and Siam, it never formally ratified that map. However, for decades, it utilized it. In international law, silence can be interpreted as consent. By the time Cambodia achieved independence in 1953, the temple was already under Thai administrative and military control.
When we regained our independence, we saw it was occupied. We considered our nation's spiritual link to this site for centuries and the map that was drawn. So, we asked the International Court of Justice for a decision, as is our right under international law.
In 1962, the International Court of Justice ruled Preah Vihear belonged to Cambodia, not on the basis of recent occupation or the decision of the Border Commission, but on Siam's consistent use of the French map over several decades, as the use implied that Siam had ratified that map.
We followed the court's specific judgment about the temple building itself. We withdrew our soldiers. However, we must point out that the land beneath the temple remained, in our view, geographically connected to our territory, and the main way to reach it was still from our side.
In 2007, we proposed Preah Vihear for UNESCO World Heritage status. Our aim was not to make a singular claim, but to ensure its protection as a globally significant site, which also supported its recognized sovereignty.
UNESCO encouraged a joint submission. Thailand initially engaged in discussions, then withdrew under domestic political pressures. Consequently, in 2008, Cambodia proceeded with a unilateral nomination.
Our decision to submit alone was for its preservation, not to cause trouble.
While we acknowledge the temple's inscription, we saw Cambodia's solo action and later actions on the ground as going beyond the 1962 ruling. Our concern was the perceived movement into areas we believe are part of our undrawn border.
The court had ruled on the temple, but the surrounding territory remained a point of contention. An estimated 4.6 square kilometers surrounding the temple remained without a mutually agreed definition. a sensitive area ripe for escalation. By 2011, diplomatic exchanges were tragically overshadowed by armed confrontations. Artillery fire impacted a site of profound historical and cultural significance.
Given the increasing border incidents in 2011, we felt it was necessary to return to the International Court of Justice. Our goal was to get a clear interpretation of the 1962 judgment so that we could resolve the conflict through legal means.
And in 2013, the court clarified its ruling, declaring not just the temple structure but the entire promontory of Preah Vihear to be under Cambodian sovereignty.
A court decision, while legally binding, is different from the practical work of fully marking the border and ensuring it's followed on the ground. The court's judgment needs careful action along with ongoing talks about the border.
Technically, ICJ judgments are binding under the United Nations Charter. Article 94 requires member states to comply. But the court has no enforcement force of its own. If a nation refuses compliance, the matter may be brought to the UN Security Council for further action, but real outcomes depend on political will. For years after the 2013 ruling, the immediate vicinity of Preah Vihear remained Cambodian territory. But the broader border in the Dangrek Mountains, stretching for hundreds of kilometers, stayed largely undefined. Despite diplomatic efforts and periods of calm, the underlying tensions festered. In late July 2025, the simmering dispute tragically erupted into widespread armed conflict. Fighting quickly spread beyond isolated skirmishes. Both nations accused the other of starting the violence, deploying heavy artillery, rockets, and even airstrikes. Dozens have been killed, and hundreds of thousands of civilians forced to flee their homes.
We have been forced to defend our sovereign territory against unprovoked attacks. We immediately sought an unconditional ceasefire and urgent international mediation to halt the bloodshed and return to peaceful resolution through dialogue and respect for international law.
Our forces have acted strictly in self-defense, responding to explicit acts of aggression against our land and people. While we are committed to de-escalation, any resolution must address the root causes of the conflict and secure the safety of our border communities through clear demarcation, and it should be achieved through bilateral discussions.
The international community, including the United Nations and the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, swiftly called for an end to hostilities. Malaysia, as ASEAN chair, stepped in to broker a ceasefire. After intense negotiations, both sides agreed to an unconditional halt to the fighting, which began on July 28, 2025. However, reports of isolated incidents persist, reminding everyone that a ceasefire is not a lasting peace. The fundamental difference in how they approach a final border resolution, Cambodia favoring international arbitration and Thailand insisting on direct bilateral talks, continues to complicate efforts. It was once a stairway to the gods, then a line on a colonial map, then a ruling, and now a battleground seeking lasting peace. Preah Vihear never moved, but every border around it continues to demand a clear and peaceful definition. The world ruled in law, but the mountain still waits for lasting peace.